to talk about cocaine for the soul.
I sure am. We got Denver, Minnesota, about as different of an opponent for the Wolves as you could imagine, coming off of the Phoenix sweep. I mean, we talked a little bit about Denver last time around. Like, what did the Lakers series make you think about the Nuggets? And yeah, I mean, the Wolves are going to test them with size, with perimeter defense, with like so many different, with a star that's like ascending as opposed to just like hanging on. I I don't want to get like way out over our skis here, but I'm optimistic that Minnesota is going to like it's more than a puncher's chance thing for them. And you can take that any direction you want. I think we still both agree that like you got to pick a title winner, it's Denver, but I think Minnesota looks like is kind of built in a way that you can just easily foresee some of the problems that the Wolves can present for Denver.
Yeah, and I think Denver would admit that, and I'm very curious to see how, because you have Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, like those are all dudes that Anthony Edwards might get tripped up in the two-man actions with Jokic and Murray. That's not really his strength. It's let me lock in, laser into this guy where there's not going to be a ton of other stuff thrown my way. I just want to guard on ball independent of screens. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, like those are guys that can very much frustrate Jamal Murray. And Jamal Murray is just a postseason legend. There's no 2-game winners in the last series.
Yeah.
But he's dealing with a calf strain. Having time off is certainly going to help. Is it okay, though, if he's not Jamal Murray for 30 of his 40-something minutes to where you're kind of banking on these pockets of detonations from him? And then can you bank on them as readily against a Wolves team that can throw size and length at you? I'm with you in the sense that I think the most popular pick is going to be Timberwolves or Nuggets in 7, where everyone just sees this being a series that goes the distance. And we'll see, I'm assuming even with Chris Finch maybe not being on the sidelines for it, like that, I don't know that would impact the team really at all. But like, I'm so fascinated to see whether what Minnesota does holds up when you get into sort of crunch time, or where it's what the Nuggets have done, or they did a lot against the Lakers, is it felt like they had their stretches of their minutes long stretches of brilliance, and they knew that was enough separation to just win. And you saw it in the way that you could see, like, I'm not a fan of saying this all the time, but like Jokic and Murray visibly shifting their mindset at points. Like you could just sense it during those games. And are the Nuggets going to have more of a wire-to-wire approach to these games against a Wolves team because they view them as more of a threat? I think Anthony Davis did a fantastic job insofar as you can. Like, he made his life difficult. It just didn't matter. Go look at there were times where it felt like Jokic was struggling, and then you look at his stat line at the end of the game, and it's like, what the fuck are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see whether, not that the Nuggets don't respect the Lakers, but whether they take this series more seriously from the jump, to where it's, well, we're not just banking on these second half runs or like separating ourselves in crunch time. And then how does that impact the Timberwolves' approach? And does it even matter, because their defense can be like, if they're able to generate turnovers, and if you don't need to send, like, just the idea that you don't need to send 2 to the ball to guard Jamal Murray is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. I think a couple of things I'm interested in, so Minnesota has the ability to put 3, if you have Alexander Walker out there, just like elite one-on-one defenders on your best scorers on the other team. And like, that's awesome against a team like Phoenix, who like sort of default to the type of offense that Denver doesn't want to ever play, which is like stagnant ISO, like I'm going to beat you head up. And that, like, the Wolves are just like, couldn't be happier, I think, with like playing a team like that. I wonder how much those same elite wing / combo forward perimeter defenders can have an impact against the Denver offense that's just like hunting movement and the best shot for someone that's in an advantageous position, as opposed to like everyone standing still watching a one-on-one matchup. Like, Denver's not going to, like, Denver does that, and Murray will do that, like if all the other options they've tried on the possession didn't work. Whereas the Suns are like, that's choice number 1, and that plays into Minnesota's hands. So that's something I'm interested in. I wonder what you think. Like, part of Rudy Gobert's, defensive excellence this year was like, man, that guy's moving well in space, right? So like you would say, I mean, I feel pretty good about him like handling the Jokic Murray 2-man game, but I mean, Anthony Davis probably is even better suited to that. And when it mattered, like the Nuggets still got to what they wanted. I wonder what you think about either of those aspects, like the perimeter defenders in a different type of offensive matchup, and then like is Gobert gonna be capable of navigating all the back and forth stuff with Jokic and Murray? And then because you mentioned you're gonna probably try to involve Edwards in that too, just hoping that his defensive development is not yet at the level where in addition to lockdown ISO stuff, he can also
probably
make good reads.
Agree or disagree? Do you think he's better served? And there's the height thing, so that might factor into this, but is he better served guarding Jamal Murray than he would be guarding Michael Porter Jr., just because the motion that Michael Porter Jr. is going to be in addition to then giving up that size, is just not something that Edwards is known for? I don't want to say navigating well, but that's not his forte.
He's not there yet. No, right. There's on ball and off ball, and he's got on ball like down, but off ball running around, like talking through switches and things like that. Like that's another level. My first thought was like, who are you putting McDaniels on? Because I think that's the guy I want, like in the full like clamp down position. But then like, so is McDaniels on Jamal Murray more? Everybody's going to pass everybody off, like because the Nuggets move so much. But
traditionally, hasn't McDaniels gotten the Murray assignment in this matchup? If I'm not mistaken, I guess listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but
I can't remember. That was my first instinct. Is that's what I would want to do. Just to the length on Murray, who wants to shoot jump shots. Generally speaking, like I like that a little. Like, not that you can hide Edwards on somebody else, but like you could put Edwards on like Gordon, I guess, if you wanted to. And if you're comfortable having Cat guard Kevin Durant, you should probably feel okay about him guarding MPJ. Like the matchups are going to be really interesting. And like which ones.
So you don't think they're going to go the route of just kind of like Rudy for AG so that he can protect the paint, and then you're going to throw Towns at Jokic like they've done in the past?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I'd like the idea of because then my earlier question is kind of moot because you're not really involving Gobert in the 2-man stuff, and you can just have him be a backline helper. Yeah, I don't know what you do. I think, well, because we both think this series might be fairly long, you're going to see a lot of permutations probably.
I do think what we see in this series from the Timberwolves perspective is that I don't know how I want to flesh out the final, like the fifth member of it, but this feels like a series in which, I mean, I think we know it, not that karl-anthony Towns will be marginalized, but like they're going to lean heavily on the Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards together minutes. And then you could flesh out from there just because of what against at least Denver's, if we go back and look at it, I know that starting can make it a little weird, but looking at what lineup of the Timberwolves plays the most against Denver's top 5, it feels like it might be the Conley, Gobert, and then Naw with Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels rather than having karl-anthony Towns in there, just because of all the different things you can do defensively with that group versus Towns. Whereas again, he's defended. He could still be slow, but like his defense has probably been as good as it's been for his career most of this season. Yeah. So, but like that's like I think that's kind of where I'm at, where how they'll approach trying to gum up Denver's offense, and maybe you'll see them take more lineup chances or vary them when Denver has more second unit heavy options there. So they have so many different levers to pull, which I think really bodes well. But Denver's offense is such a machine from so many different levels and areas and aspects to where even you could say, okay, hide someone on Aaron Gordon. It's like that dude, the way he will move off the ball, and it's just like abrupt. It's not like constant motion, but it's just like abrupt. And then the way that he's able to even make plays with the ball, whereas as a passer there, it's going to, I've been using this phrase a lot during the play, stress test the Wolves defense for sure. And, they're another thing that I'm going to be interested to watch is, can they do enough on the offensive end to make sure that their defense is set to not where it's okay, Denver's not going to be a team that lives in transition, But you look at the stuff where they're getting into their sets maybe quicker and you're still in the half quarters, it's semi-transition. That's just going to be easier for Denver to do if it's working off a Wolves squandered offensive possession, whether it's a turnover, missed shot, whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there. I just wonder what Minnesota can do offensively that's going to really concern Denver, like or that's going to be like we can go to this well over and over. We're going to get good shots. Like that's just kind of a macro take on the Wolves because their offense was of either side of the floor. Their offense was the relatively weaker one during this season. And like I think a lot of the thinking going into the Phoenix game and the reason that Phoenix series and the reason Phoenix was so good against Minnesota during the year was like, the Wolves just didn't have enough offensive consistency or like enough stuff to go to really, I guess, to just keep up with what Phoenix was able to do, like in a rock fight type of a game. If it came to that, I struggle beyond like Edwards just being great in an individual way. Where's Minnesota going to like, we need a bucket. Like what sets are we running? Like who are we attacking on Denver? Like, how are we scoring? And like, that's kind of an unanswerable question because it's been one that the Wolves haven't really successfully answered all season because their offense just wasn't that good. It used to be like, oh, we're going to get Jokic involved in as many pick and rolls as possible and make him move. And we may see that, but I struggle to find a clear like lifeline offensively for Minnesota that doesn't involve Edwards, taking even a further step forward as like, well, this guy is good enough on his own to
I do think so. If you have what could help them is so Jaden McDaniels just attacking off the dribble more in that first round series. If the Nuggets are going to give him the same type of runway, that's something you can hope persists. And there's also, we can't forget about karl-Anthony Towns, who is, I don't know if I would call him wonderfully chaotic, but he's definitely enjoyably chaotic to where it's like in the Sun series, you end up with, a small on you, but you're going to settle for a 3-pointer. You end up going up against, Kevin Durant and it's, I'm going to try and like maybe drive and settle there. But then there's also times where he will follow it all the way to the basket. So his driving game, I think, will be super important to Minnesota's offense. Not that Denver's going to give him room, but if there's switches or if there's a mismatch, is he going to be able to punch that? Not just throw karl-Anthony Towns in the post, which is just not a huge part of his game anymore. It's, can he attack, like get by these, like if he has someone who's smaller on him, try and punish them by getting, it's not these blazing fast drives, even though he does have that speed, but it's being a little bit more physical with that. And so I still think he will do a better job, it feels like, of maybe getting rid of the ball. Sometimes he'll throw it to people that don't exist, but it's can he read the matchups that he's going to have and the space that he's going to have and then make the right decision in terms of how to attack, whether it is launching for a three, or this is when I need to stop and take a jumper. This is when I need to try and follow through to get all the way to the basket, because that is their second offensive lifeline. Karl-Anthony Towns is still just an incredible offensive player. Mm-hmm. And I think that people forget that. The meniscus injury that, of course, derailed part of his season. And then he comes back. He doesn't look super right. And again, he had such a weird, I'd call it a weird series against Phoenix. But then you go back and you look at the numbers and it's, all right, well, Karl-Anthony Towns averaged 19 points a game and shot, 52.9% from three. I'd probably like to see that volume come up. Like Minnesota's not this super high volume 3-point shooting team, but I think they need that volume against a Denver team that also, while they might not be winning the 3-point battle on a night-to-night basis, they could just be so lethal in the half court that there are going to be nights where your defense just isn't enough. And so can you offset any of that variance and separation by getting up more of your own threes? Just because when I look at the Wolves and when you think of the Nuggets, they have at least guys you can envision as caps lock shooters, where it's Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray. Jokic needs to take more threes, but he will take them. And then Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, not shooting well right now, but we know that should normalize. When you think about that for the Wolves, Anthony Edwards has the volume. Like, you don't consider him a caps lock shooter. And he shot the hell out of the ball, 44% in round one. There's really just Karl-Anthony Towns. And to me, it's just a little, not uncomfortable, but I find it bizarre when you look at it. It's okay. Well, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker's just getting up way more threes than Karl-Anthony Towns right now. And ditto for Mike Conley, and Towns averaged fewer minutes in round one than they did. But still, that's just like to me, when you're this is my long-winded way of trying to answer your question. Your concern, the answer needs to be Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't know if it necessarily will be.
Yeah,
And
it
especially
has
in
to
this
be.
matchup.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah.
But if it's not going to be him, I did just mention Jaden McDaniels and what he was able to do. I'm sure he will have that type of space. Like he's been on a shooting seesaw all season. And so even if he gets the threes up or if he's attacking off the dribble, is that something you call bankable? And no, it's not with Jaden
No.
McDaniels. And even Naz Reid saw his role diminish a little bit in round one. Has this become a Naz Reid series? Because while the Nuggets are big, I think Naz Reid is versatile enough to where you consider him sort of a fringe wing. It's not sort of, we saw Phoenix downsize in a way that could marginalize him, and Denver won't do that. But at the same time, the way they play with size is not the way other team plays with size, because there's nothing traditional about the size that they play.
Yeah, I think, I it's just like one of the things you would do typically as Minnesota when your offense is just not at the level of your opponent is you'd shoot more threes and make it a higher variance game. And like, it's other than Cat, there's nobody you feel great about that strategy with, right? Like it's just another way. If it goes bad for the Wolves, it might just be because they sort of have to play the Nuggets on more like even terms, and they just can't get the 3-point volume, or can't get enough of it from anybody that is actually going to make them, So like, I guess what I would say is I can imagine like one or two like pretty ugly blowouts in favor of Denver because the Nuggets are just like, happy with if Minnesota goes high variance and tries to get up a bunch of threes and just can't hit them. Like, that's one way I could see some games swinging in this series. I don't know. You got anything else? Like,
I have two things that are relatively quick, and I feel like we focused a lot on the Wolves. We mentioned Michael Porter Jr. in our previous podcast if the Nuggets beat the Lakers. That's like, if he's going to continue to shoot like this, that can almost alleviate any concern you have about Jamal Murray's calf strain or the Nuggets and this whole act of, we're fine going into halftime without the lead and we'll just come back, because the way that he's playing. The other thing too is, and I understand these will not be a huge sample size, because the sample size on this for the entire Lakers series, so 5 games, was 71 possessions played outside of garbage time without Nikola Jokic. What is going to happen during the 8 minutes or so per game that he is on the bench? And specifically against this Timberwolves team, are they better built than most to abuse the Nuggets during those minutes? Because you're going to default. I wouldn't think it'll be like a DeAndre Jordan series. You're going to stick with your Aaron Gordon at the 5 model. Those lineups against the Lakers ranked in the 0th percentile of offensive efficiency.
Yeah.
Life's not going to get any easier against the Wolves. And so how does that end up looking for, because that's not, when you have Aaron Gordon at the 5, it can be effective, but that's not the best lineups they're throwing out there. It's, and even just whatever lineup you want to see with it, it's probably going to be Gordon, Watson, Brown, Murray, maybe KCP's in there. Do you sprinkle a little bit of Michael Porter Jr. in there? If it is any version of that, and I'll go on a limb and say, just because of the way they like to use KCP and Jokic together, that their most used non-Jokic lineup will be Gordon, Porter, Watson, Brown, and Murray. That's my prediction. That's not a lineup that's built to generate all these mismatches on offense. And so you're not going to scare the Wolves, is my point, into changing the way that they have played all season. I'm not saying the entire game can shift on that way, but I do think this is going to be a series for the Nuggets where it could get harder, a lot harder to, I don't even want to say survive, but withstand less damage during the non-Jokic minutes.
Yeah, my head went to, so if you've got Gordon at center, you sort of must have Edwards in the game at that point for the Wolves, because I think you want to call up Gordon's guy and like kind of weirdly involve him in screening action. Gordon, I think, is a phenomenal like 5-position isolation defender. So if they switch it and you get Gordon on Edwards, like, first of all, sign me up. I could not be more excited for an individual matchup than that. But you pull Gordon out of the lane, then like, if you're, I guess, disciplined about things, and Edwards does do as good of a job getting off the ball at the right times as he did in the first round, like, then there's no rim protection there, and you don't have to play the high variance game, and you might be able to get some paint points. You might be able to get some cutters, some other, side pick and rolls as the ball swings like that. So I'm just echoing your point. Like, those are obviously the minutes where I would be deliberately making sure I had Edwards on when Jokic was off, just because like the advantage you create there potentially is just so much bigger than, and look, Edwards might just play 45 minutes and Jokic might too. So like, I don't know how, much of a swing this can have, but if you're in Minnesota's position, those marginal advantages, even if it's a minute or two per game, like you have to capitalize on those. Cause I do just think generally speaking, it's hard for you to find like ways through offensively. So yeah, I think that's a key thing.
Do you have any concerns about how the Nuggets will ultimately defend Anthony Edwards? I think KCP is clearly a tougher matchup than anything Phoenix could throw at him. But during the regular season, and the sample is actually quite extensive, the Wolves averaged as a team 1.32 points per possession when KCP defended Anthony Edwards. And it's not just Anthony Edwards scoring. It's for the entire team. And I think KCP is still one of the more underappreciated defenders in the league. But that is something just because of how physical Anthony Edwards and explosive he could be. I thought KCP had a heck of a defensive series against the Lakers. I'm just wondering, do you get to a point where, okay, if you put Denver's defense, I think Denver's defense is probably most vulnerable when it's put in rotation. And I'm now wondering, there was a level of concession, it felt like, in the Lakers series where that was just, okay, like whatever, we know LeBron exists. But like Anthony Edwards might be built to create a level of chaos that they didn't have to deal with in the Lakers series. And so it's, you can't really pull do we have Gordon go at him from the jump, or are they going to go out of their way to make sure that Gordon isn't involved in the two where it's, if you're going to have someone screen for Edwards, it's anybody but who Gordon is defending.
I think that's right. I think, one big like swing or pivot point in the series could be, because you don't want Jokic, if you have Edwards on the ball and the Wolves are going to just set high screens for him, you really don't want Jokic being involved in that, to be in the drop with Edwards having a head of steam to either go right at him or pull up. And so then it's like, well, you probably just got to put two on the ball and get it out of Edwards' hands. And then it's like, I mean, Rudy Gobert catching the ball on the short roll and having to make a decision or score, is that going to be like just why the Wolves can't get anything done? Because I think if you're Denver, you want as many of those situations as you can get where, one, Edwards no longer has the ball, and two, Rudy Gobert has it kind of on the move, having to like score or make a decision. Like that's, but then, again, you don't have to have Gobert. Like there's so many, that's going to be a really interesting back and forth, is like, how does Denver make it so that Rudy Gobert is having to be like a big factor offensively? And then how do the Nuggets move bodies around so that they can there's just that I think is going to be a huge like pivot point. I keep saying that, but in the series is like, what are you going to make Rudy Gobert have to do offensively if you're Denver, and how extensively can you exploit that?
And I think maybe one problem with Denver is that if you do try to increase your versatility or defensive aggression from a talent perspective, where it's, well, we could play Peyton Watson or Christian Brown. I think Christian Brown did okay on Anthony Edwards this year. I probably didn't see enough of it. And by the way, as host of the best national NBA podcast in the business, look at the charts. We're higher than number one. I don't even know how that works out. I want to implore fans, we're not going to read too much into what happened during the regular season. It's not just a matter of, okay, well, who was available? The good teams are just changing all the stuff that they do in the playoffs anyway. And so you can sit here and tell me, I mean, this is different because they split the season series this year, but I don't want to cite like these regular season numbers. I'm just anecdotally, you could say, I felt like to me, Christian Brown held up okay against Anthony Edwards. Anything you do, not only is it one, you get into the matter of, okay, well, if we're playing Brown with a bunch of starters, who are we pulling? Mm-hmm. And then you're making an offensive concession there. No matter whether it's Peyton Watson, whether it's Brown. If you're pulling Michael Porter Jr., certainly. If you're pulling Aaron Gordon, okay, maybe not, but you're probably hurting your defense in that regard. I would be interested to see, though, because you mentioned maybe mirroring Edwards' minutes to the AG at the 5, making sure he's on the court during those stints. I think I'm absolutely making sure that maybe both Watson and Brown, because if your offense isn't going to be even close to elite or average without Jokic anyway, I might just make sure that both of those guys are on the court then, so that we have all these different types of looks to throw at Anthony Edwards.
I think to your point, like Mike Malone does not like to play Brown and Watson together because of the offensive issues it creates. But I think that's a really interesting idea of like, well, we know we're going to get, we know we aren't going to score without Jokic, so we may as well just over-index on defense.
Let's lean into it. Get some DeAndre Jordan in there.
Yeah, whatever. Hope the 3 minutes you play without Jokic are like 4-2 Minnesota, as opposed to like, 10-4. Like, just keep it slow, keep it ugly, let that clock, like that kind of thing. That's an interesting way to go. Again, it's. I think this is a long series. If you had to say, I mean, it's kind of obvious because we're just so in the bag for Denver and have been all along. But like, I don't see the way that this is a shorter series that Minnesota wins. Like, it's we'll know more after game one and we see some matchups. But like, it's just.
I think if it's a shorter series, it's because that Minnesota wins. I would look at, okay, well, what is Murray doing? How is that calf? And then did Denver's 3-point shooting just never normalize? Because you go back and look at the series numbers against the Lakers. Michael Porter Jr. shot 20 of 41 from 3. That dude is ridiculous. Murray, 29.4%. KCP, 28.6%. Jokic, 33.3%. Reggie Jackson, 30.8%. Peyton Watson, 30%. Aaron Gordon, 1 of 10, so 10%. So I think, and you look at Christian Brown, barely took any. He was 0 of 9 in that series. So just Justin Holiday, 1 of 9. I didn't even realize Justin Holiday played that many minutes to launch 9 3-pointers in that series. So that is not the recipe, because I don't think the Wolves can just be like, we're going to make sure that Denver doesn't make their threes. Other teams should do that. But that would be okay, Murray doesn't have a good series because of the calf, not able to create the separation or hit the difficult jumpers that he was still hitting by the end of the Lakers series when it mattered most. And Denver overall, their 3-point shooting kind of never progressed to where we know it could be with the talent that they have on hand.
Yeah.
To that end, who you got?
I was just gonna say Denver in 7. How about that?
I'm gonna go Denver in 6. I think anyone who's listened knows that I respect the hell out of what the Wolves has done this year. And I could see this. I want it to go 7. I'll be rooting for 7. I still just think that we're underestimating the gear that the Nuggets are able to hit. And I'm not going to keep coming back to this but there was a very dynastic era Warriors vibes to them understanding that we only need to play our peak basketball for minutes at a time to create separation. You know what? If we need to elongate, extrapolate those stretches, we will. And I don't like boiling it down to like they will flip a switch. That's not what I'm saying this is. And I think that Minnesota's defense could really gum up the works if they tried. But no defense has ever fully gummed up the works. Like, look at what just happened in the Lakers series, where you had all these things going your way, and the Nuggets were just still able to get what they needed during the highest leverage of moments. And you see the shift in mindset from Jokic at points. I think this is just going to be a series where we see more peak Nuggets for longer stretches is basically what I'm getting at. And that's just not offensively. If this gets into a fight of which team can stop the other's offense more, as much respect as I have for Minnesota's defense, the answer is not Minnesota, just because Denver's offense is a fucking killer.
Yeah. I think I agree generally with that. And it's kind of just like, I think it's a testament to Minnesota that not only is it fair at peak levels offensively more often, but like it will have to, because it's not like the Lakers series where, all the perimeter shooting is going cold for long stretches and you can get away. I think Denver's going to have to bring pretty close to like its best stuff most of the time to beat the Wolves, which is like, that's exciting, because that's not the case against the Lakers. Obviously, like the Lakers just beat them once in a dozen tries or whatever it is.
What was your hesitation? Were you thinking about Wolves in 7, or were you trying to go Nuggets in 6?
No, if I were going any other direction, it would have been Denver in 6, probably. I want to give the Wolves credit. The more I think about it, the more I am convinced that like Minnesota has a couple elements, the defense being legit and Edwards kind of being someone that there might not be a solution for a game or two, that they could push them all the way. But you're like forced to choose an alternative, it'd be Denver in 6 probably. I can't get all the way there with Minnesota.
and I'm not trying to give out the, attaboys here. It would not shock me though if the Timberwolves won this series. I'm picking the Nuggets in 6. If you want me to pick them in 7, it would not surprise me if the Wolves won this series. I think that's the best form of praise I can give, is that I consider the Nuggets head and shoulders above basically everyone, but because of the way they match up and what Minnesota's done specifically on defense this year, what Anthony Edwards is doing on offense in general, it just wouldn't. If you told me that it's Timberwolves in 6, and you told me everyone on Denver was healthy, I'd probably be a little. It just wouldn't surprise me.
Well, and maybe this is the best attaboy for Minnesota overall. Is like if it were OKC, I'd feel more confident about Denver. If it were the Clippers or the Mavs, I'd definitely feel more confident about Denver. And that's like, I don't know, in a vacuum where I'd rank all those other teams, especially OKC versus Minnesota. But like for purposes of playing the Nuggets, Minnesota is the best you're going to do in the West. I think that's pretty clear.